Aloha kakahiaka. Mahalo, Josh. We go back. Yeah, I want to say it's been about a decade. We had the pleasure of traveling together throughout the Pacific. And so when Josh asked me, "Oh, would you mind coming to talk?" I was like, "Of course, anything for you." So I'm really glad to be here with you this morning. I am from this land. I grew up in Waiahole. My family have been there since the 60s. A Mahi'ai family, we farmed, and so it's just I love this part of the island. And my family and I, we still have our farm in Waiahole. My mom still is there, and so we still go there quite often. This is my oldest, Lilehua. She said, "Mom, can I come with you this morning?" I was like, "Well, you might be bored," but she wanted to come, so here she is, being my little assistant. So I am the wife and mother of 4 keiki. So Lililehua is my oldest; she's 8, and then I have Kahekili II, who is 6. La'akea, who just made 5, and Kalai Moku, we call him Moku Bear, he is 2. And so we live in a hui manu. And so this morning, when I was looking out my window, I'm like, oh man, Kualoa is catching it this morning. It was raining, but Kala came out today, and it's just such a beautiful day. So as Josh shared, I'm the director of the Nutrition Support Shared Services at the University of Hawaii Cancer Center. I've been at the University of Hawaii since 2011 in various positions, but have started working at the Cancer Center in 2024. I am a registered dietitian. I'm a licensed dietitian, Indigenous and certified lactation counselor. So I'm very much passionate about food, and especially thinking about food and our nutrition in our early stages of life. I'm a Maryknoll lifer. I went there from kindergarten. My grandmother, Marie, Lucille Marie, who I was named for, was in the very first graduating class of Maryknoll. So as a good, Portuguese granddaughter, I followed in her footsteps, and was just very, it was a blessing, all the sacrifices that my family did to allow that to occur. I also was an athlete. I played volleyball in college. So I'm very much familiar with this idea of how we fuel our body helps with our performance. So I played volleyball at Dartmouth College. And then I did all of my training at Purdue University for graduate school, and my dietetics training through Iowa State before I came back here to Hawaii. I always knew that I wanted to be able to serve the lahui, to serve the community. At first, I thought it would be through medical school, but then I soon realized that I don't do well with blood, so I wouldn't make a very good doctor. But I realized that we all have to eat, and oftentimes multiple times a day, right? So, and I hope multiple times a day. And so I realized that this could be a real way that I could serve my community through a behavior that, is common amongst all of us. So that's a little bit about my background. Any questions on what a registered dietitian is? Are we familiar with that? Yeah. So I often get questions about what's the difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist. So a registered dietitian is a credentialed health profession that undergoes, specific regimen of training. So we have a didactic training that we have to do through a university setting, and then we have to do a supervised practice, like an internship, clinical hours. And those clinical hours, they're not only in the hospital setting, they are in the community setting, school food programs, different community nutrition programs, as well as food service and management. So we're trained in multiple different aspects of nutrition, and then we have to sit for an exam. And then we have to maintain our credential through continuing education units, every 5 years. And so that's the background of a registered dietitian. A nutritionist can really be anybody. You can go and complete a 20-hour course online and then get a paper saying you're a nutritionist. Okay, and so there can be various levels of knowledge behind that. Not to say that there's not any benefits to having that knowledge. It's just that there's certain things that you'd want to make sure that you're getting that information from a credentialed provider, especially when we think about medical nutrition therapy, which is really about thinking about how nutrition can be our medicine. And so that's a little bit behind the basis of that. And so some of the things that Josh asked me to talk about a little bit is if we were to take, a step back in time, a couple 100 years ago, what did this Aina look like? And what did the people look like that lived on this Aina? And so estimates are anywhere between 800,000 to 1.2 million Hawaiians lived across the Pai Aina. So that's almost as many people that live here now. I think the estimates are like 1.4 million or something like that, give or take on either end. But we were completely self-sufficient. And so we had a very sophisticated food systems. Josh could tell you all about it if you ever want to ask him, because that's really is his area of expertise. I learned a lot about that through him and his advisor, Dr. Dienick. But we had a really rich food systems. We had that ahupua'a systems going from Mauka to Makai, and really with different crops and foods being grown at different parts of the ahupua'a that really thrived within that ahupua'a. And so we were able to, sustain a population of around 1 million people, all through within what was grown and raised here in Hawaii. And so our current estimates are that a majority of the foods that people ate during that time were really from plants. So we were super plant forward. If we want to put a percentage to it, it's like 78% of what we ate during a day came from foods like, I don't have kalo in its original form, but this is poi. Poi, the estimates are anywhere from 5 pounds to 15 pounds a day of poi alone is what Hawaiians ate. And, it gives me chicken skin when I think about this. So kalo is our ancestor. That is our older brother. And so there's a lot of, mana that's within this food that we're carrying across our generations. And so it's an amazing food. And when you think about if we were eating 5 to 15 pounds of poi a day, what are the amazing things that come with that I think about from a nutrition perspective? So taro is grown in the ground, right? It's, you either have wetland taro or you have dryland taro, but it's the root that's in the dirt. And so that root, because it's in the dirt and the soils, it's really high in minerals. So your calcium, your phosphorus. And so Hawaiians had amazing teeth. Our teeth were and people were just so amazed about how great our dentition was. But if you were eating that amount of poi, and there wasn't the things that you go to the grocery store, all the candies and the drinks, so that wasn't a part of it. So they were getting a lot of great minerals. And there's a lot of really good fiber in here, so really good for your gut health. And then the other great thing about poi is there's no refrigeration needed. And I don't know, who likes their poi fresh and who likes it when it's starting to turn a little bit, more red and with the white stuff on top? Who's our fresh guy? Okay. And then who's our, we like to go 3, 7. Yes, okay. So that's the beautiful thing about poi is that as it sits over time, it starts to ferment. And that's when it develops these really good bacteria that's super good for our gut. And so, for those of us who grew up with the poi on the table, and then, mom or grandma, they would just add fresh poi to maybe just, dampen the sourness a little bit, but that was all about feeding that good bacteria in our gut. Okay, so I'm really getting ahead of myself. As you can see, I get really exciting. I'm like throwing these things at you like minerals and fibers, like expecting that everybody's gonna know what I'm talking about, right? So nutrition is all about the way in which the things that we get in food, and those things are what we call nutrients. And so nutrients are things like water, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, micronutrients, those are our minerals, and our vitamins. So those are all nutrients. And a lot of the nutrients our body isn't able to make. So we really need to get it from food. And there's a lot of examples of that when we think about our foods that are protein. So the foods that are high in protein are generally foods that come from animals. And so this is a portion. This is a almost 3-ounce pork chop. So this is what a 3-ounce pork chop looks like. So we get a lot of protein from our animal foods, but we also can get proteins from things like nuts and beans. I have some beans in there. Tofu or soy, okay? And there's some components in proteins that we only can get through foods. And so our body is unable to make it. So really, if we think about eating a lot of different types of protein sources, it helps us to make our needs. And then when I was talking about the other nutrients, our carbohydrates, those are our starches. Those are where, our brain needs glucose. And glucose is one of the things that is most readily available from carbohydrate-rich foods for our brains to function. And so that's from things like, well, this is oatmeal. Here's some different portion sizes for rice, tortilla, mashed potatoes. So those are like our carbohydrate-rich foods. I have some ulu here. And so it's kind of maybe confusing because you're like, wait, ulu is like a fruit. It's breadfruit. Why am I telling you, when I'm talking about mashed potatoes and rice? And so, the nutrients can come from lots of different foods is essentially kind of the main component there. And then when we think about fats, contrary to what, we may have heard growing up or over time, fats are not bad. We need fats in our body to function. And so fats come from things like avocado. They also are in coconuts, in many of the liquid oils and things like that. It's just one of those things where we don't need a lot of it. And then our micronutrients, our vitamins and minerals, those are the things that we really get a lot of when we eat our fruits and vegetables. So this is the ho'io salad, depending, or if you're from Maui, I think you might call it pohole. The fern shoots, and then I have some tomatoes here. These are yams, some bok choy. So those are just some of the examples of fruits. And so and the one other thing that I didn't mention is we also have, dairy, which is a good source for protein. It's a good source for micronutrients. But the dairy group doesn't only have to come from a cow, so predominantly there's, cow milk, but there's also like soy milk that's made from soy. And there's a lot of other plant-based milks that are available as alternatives because, some people have difficulties with digesting the components in milk. And so there's a lot more options available for that. They just have some differences in the minerals and vitamins that are incorporated in that. So those are kind of the general building blocks of nutrition when we think about food. And so, as I was mentioning, to just give you the backstory. So, thinking about poi, thinking about taro, you're getting a lot of vitamins, you're getting a lot of minerals, you're getting a lot of fiber, which is a type of carbohydrate. It's something that our body isn't able to break down, so it's really good for our gut and keeping us regular. There's also water in here, so you have that fluid component. So poi is really a great vehicle for a lot of different nutrients that we need. So, back in the day, a couple hundred years ago, we ate a lot of poi. That was our main carbohydrate. We also ate a lot of breadfruit, a lot of sweet potato. So a lot of those root vegetables were a major component of our diet. We also ate a lot of leafy greens. So when you think about the tops of the kalo plant, the leaves of the uala, and then, various greens that you would get from the ocean, the seaweed. So that's about 78% of your diet. And then the remaining component, they ate a lot of fish, and especially fish like reef fish. And so, not like your salmon, right? That wasn't a thing, but, a lot of your reef fish. So a lot of, lean fish, or a lean protein, I guess I should say. Chicken wasn't too, because there was kapu and class systems and ways, certain people ate certain things. And so moa and pua'a chicken, that wasn't necessarily for the maka'ainana, for the common. So there was different, and then there was different kapus as to when certain foods were eaten. If you were pregnant, certain foods that you were eating, our kupuna, they were so hakamai in thinking about the foods and when we should eat, and especially thinking about different life stages. So that was pretty much kind of the way in which we ate, very plant forward. Very much plants were the basis of how the diet was. And when we look at accounts of what they would describe Hawaiians to look like, they were tall, bless you, they were lean, they were very, just, I guess you could say, athletic specimens. I don't know what's the right way to describe it, but they all looked healthy, and fit and lean. And so, obviously their lifestyle was very active, from a day to day. And so you have the combination of that active lifestyle along with a lot of plants, and lean proteins and things like that really just promoted health and well-being. And so a lot of the chronic conditions that you see today weren't apparent at that time. And so fast forward to now, as you can see, the estimates are anywhere between 85-90% of our food comes in on a ship. And so a lot of our food is imported in. And so our food systems aren't really situated in a way to really be self-sustaining, and really have the foundation be our traditional crops, our ulu and our kalo and our sweet potato as the foundation of our food. So, with the advent of the plantation days and all of that, and all of our different communities that have come, rice has become the foundation of our diets. We eat a lot of rice. So think about replacing that 5 pounds a day of poi, with these starches here. And what I'm going to tell you as a dietitian is that there is no such thing as a bad food, okay? It's just certain foods we just shouldn't really eat all the time. It's really about moderation and balance. And so we've kind of gone a different way where we have a diet that's really based on rice, white rice, which really our body digests like that. You know, it doesn't have the fiber. Our body doesn't really have to work hard to break it down. And so it's instantly available for energy. And the ways our body works is that if we don't need it to burn it off, it's just going to store it for later, right? And then you're just going to keep storing and storing and storing. And then that's what happened. And I'm not saying that it's rice's fault. I'm not trying to pick on rice. I eat rice. You know, I like rice. But again, it's just a moderation thing. And so the more that we don't have that balance between our lifestyle, our active lifestyle, and the choices in the foods we make, then that's what tips us into an issue in regards to how much we're putting in, how much we're burning off, you know, through, you know, different activities, ways of life that really is getting our body going. So it's using that energy versus it's storing in our body. And so the more that we have storing, then it comes into a situation where we start to gain weight. And when we gain weight, that's when we have problems with all of the different types of chronic diseases. You know, we know that diabetes, heart disease, cancer is all related to how much weight that we carry on ourselves, and then our activity and the foods that we choose. And so, any questions on anything? I've been talking for a while, so I want to make sure to check in to see if there's any questions.
That you focus on the cancer side, what of those foods help to either battle it, or like if you already have cancer, I know sugar is a no-no with cancer. So what foods there would you focus on to be anti-cancer?
Okay, that's a really great question. So from a cancer prevention strategy, which really is in alignment with just a healthy diet lifestyle strategy, is really getting a lot of fruits and vegetables. So you want to think about your plate, the more color, the better. And so when you think about your fruits and your vegetables and all of the different colors, these are where there's, you know, specific components in the food that have been found to really be beneficial, like the purple that they have, like they call them, there are different phytochemicals in them that they found to be beneficial. So, and then it's also because when you eat fruits and vegetables, you get a lot of fiber, right? So it's that fiber, it's those vitamins, and those other phytochemical components in foods that's really helpful from a prevention standpoint. The other thing for certain cancers, red meats, so your steaks, your porks, if we, you know, and again, I want to caution what I'm saying, that if you eat a pork chop, eating a pork chop is okay, right? It's just when it's in excess over a long period of time, right? So we want to make sure that these components, we want to eat this with a lot of these, right? But so red meat has been found to be a lot of red meat intake increases our risk for cancer. Now, with the comment about sugar, it really is about that energy balance, right? High energy increases our risk for carrying a greater amount of weight than we want to be, and having a greater weight than we need to be is what increases our risk for cancer, for diabetes. So really it's about finding that healthy weight point, and you know, that's something that you want to have a conversation with your health providers about, what is the right place for me in determining that. Now, I mean, because ultimately though, we need to have the energy for our brains to function, right? So sugar isn't bad. It's that overdoing it of sugar. And the problem is that I love that we see lots of water bottles around, right? So people, we need to have water being the default for our beverages. And that can be really difficult to do when we go to the store and you're going to go and check out and you just have a cooler full of options, right? You pick your poison. I'm sorry, poison isn't the right term. Again, I'm not whatever, making it bad. Yes, thank you. It's just those are things that we want to have once in a while. And so sugar sweetened beverages, so your sodas, your Cokes, your juices, all of that. That's just additional energy that really isn't necessary, I guess is what it comes down to. Good question.
Yeah, I think the Hawaiians have always been very spiritual. And if you look at that entire table and when you go shopping, you say, is this God made? So everything on that table is God made, right? It's not made in a plant. It is a plant. So that's what I always try to.
Yeah, no,
They did. They turned God made.
so that's a nice way to talk about it, right? It's really about plants that come from the Aina and the least amount of manipulation we can do in processing. And so processing, I mean, so understand this. When we say, it's processing, processed is becoming kind of a bad word. And I want to remind you that washing your fruits and vegetables is processing them, okay? So trust me, we want to wash our fruits and vegetables because nobody wants rat lungworm, right? I'm sure Josh can tell you all about the nasty things that can happen if you don't wash your stuff. So processing, we need processing. It's just when you get to the upper layers of processing where you can't even tell what the base ingredients of your foods are, right? There's a lot of manipulation and some other additives that have been added. Oftentimes your sodium, right? So a lot of other things that can increase your risk. And so the more we can avoid that, the better. So that's a great way to talk about it. I think somebody else may have had a question.
With your expertise as a dietitian in Hawaii, what is one thing you wish every person in Hawaii knew or would adopt into their life or whatever?
Oh my goodness, I have to pick one? Top three. Oh man. Oh man. Well, okay. So I'm gonna have to default. I mean, again, because I'm an athlete, and we have to stay hydrated, and we want our hydration, our ultimate hydration, to be water. And I think the other beautiful thing is that we also want to remind ourselves that we are on an island, right? And we really need to be considerate about the sustainability. And so, having our own reusable water bottles, right? It's like a 2-for-1. So, and water is a nutrient. It is one of our 6 main nutrients. So it's really important. We need it for basic body functions. We need it for our kidneys to function. We need it for our gastrointestinal. I mean, so water, hands down, I think should be our foundational beverage of choice. I also think that if we could be more cognizant on our portions. So again, rice isn't bad. It's just the amount of rice, right? So any idea how much rice this is? I was gonna say I'm still hungry afterwards. That's how much rice this is. This is half a cup. This is half a cup of rice. So this is technically 1 serving of rice right here. But, okay, I wish I would have bought a plate. Oh, wait, there's a plate right there. Oh, okay. All right, so we can fit more vegetables on this bad boy. Okay, so if we thought about our plate, right, and we built, this is just the 1 scoop, just 1 scoop, not the giant, just a normal scoop, right? And then we threw in, right, some greens. And then, hey, if we were so lucky to have some ho'io salad, right? I mean, I don't know. We have a lot of vegetables. I mean, here, we can throw in a banana. But if this is what our plate, sorry, hope I didn't spit on you. If this is what our plate looked like, right? Where really a majority of that plate comes from plants. So again, like ultimately it's portions, right? But making sure the color. We want to see color in the plates that we eat. And I guess maybe my third thing is that we have to remember that we're all role models. Yeah. And so I don't know how many of you have young ones, but you know, it's so important that we role model these things for the next generation and just for our peers, just for everyone, you know, to see that. Because then too, it also makes a demand for that. And it sets the expectation that that's what's important, because we know that's how we're going to malama ourselves, malama each other. So anyways, I don't know. I could go on and on, but I'll stop there. Those are my top three.
I noticed you didn't mention vitamin C.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
essential. And then how did Hawaiians get their vitamin C in their diet?
Oh, that is a good question. Okay, so vitamin C is super important for like the integral components of our skins and things like that. And so if you were to have a vitamin C deficiency, you would start to see, they call it scurvy, but the skin breaks down and you have a lot of bleeding and things like that. So when thinking about, so actually like things like ulu has vitamin C in it. But ulu also, and again, okay, and Josh, you probably know, how many varieties of ulu are there?
20 plus, but here in Hawaii, the botanical gardens around, they have like 30 varieties.
So there's lots of different varieties. And so, I mean, I think we should have a whole thing of just Josh talking about this. But if we had the amount of diversity in just our ulu alone, because not all ulu is created equal. So some ulu would also have like a lot of vitamin A. And so that's what like gives you like your orange component. So the same thing can be said for bananas. So there are some bananas in the Pacific that are orange. So you can get some of that diversity within the plants themselves. Now, let me think. For vitamin C, for other, you know, because a lot of the things that we have now, like our citrus things, those are relatively newly introduced. You know, you can get vitamin C from some animal sources. So like in the Arctic, you know, like our Alaska Native cousins up in the north, there's no like citrus trees or anything. They get it from their animal sources. So again, that speaks to having diversity, you know, having lots of variety in your diet to be able to eat those different needs. And if we can think seasonal too, about the things that grow at different times, that can also help. But I know like we've kind of developed this expectations that we're going to eat tomatoes all year round in certain places. I mean, maybe here in Hawaii, we can grow tomatoes all year round, but in certain places, like ulu, there's a seasonality to ulu. But there's other things that they're doing now. So how many of you are familiar with the ulu co-op? Ulu cooperative. So now you can go and get frozen ulu in the store, because the thing about ulu is its shelf life is really short. So it doesn't have a long shelf life. But if you you know, flash boil, steam it, and you freeze it, then you can then use it for later. So there's been a lot of innovation in making these crops available, you know, year round, when maybe to kind of accommodate for some of that seasonality. Good question. Any other questions? Oh, limu. Oh, yes, limu. So our seaweeds are excellent sources for lots of different micronutrients. And you know what the pilikia is in my field is that we're trying to work towards this understanding that there's different components within different limu. So, and we haven't gotten there yet. So that's an area of under exploration so that we can say this limu actually is really excellent in these components. This limu, so that's something that we're working on. So hopefully we'll be able to have more detail by the different varieties of limu as to which ones it's high in certain nutrients. But no, excellent. Excellent. And then when you even think about your fiber, and again, so like your gut health, that is really good too.
Do you think there's like a situation where it would not be good because of like toxins in the water?
Yes, yes. You could say the same for our, our ocean friends, our fish and things like that too. That there can be concerns that they may be a vehicle for exposure to toxins and contaminants. And so again, one of the main things that we can, on that line, we can think about is like mercury too. Mercury is one of those things that, as you go up in the bigger fish, right, who eat the little fish, that mercury, it accumulates. And so, when you think about like your ahis and stuff like that, there could be the potential for a mercury exposure. So that's something that we do have to be cognizant. So again, it comes down to that moderation component. And then really in certain life stages, so during pregnancy, they don't recommend, you want to really moderate that because you want to limit that exposure in utero. And so it does really get back to thinking about sustainability and caring for the land and really being conscious of how we interact with the land and the, what type of opala and trash that we make and how we, what we do with that trash and all of those types of things, because then it can have far-reaching effects later. Any other questions?
Oh yeah, so like iPhone is a pretty hot topic, right, in health circles and things like that. But you mentioned earlier portions, and a lot of people actively portion out things like rice, but I don't know anybody who consciously portions out poi.
Yeah.
Like, I know family members who can't eat poi because they're diabetic. So our lifestyles are different. A lot of us have vulnerabilities or susceptibilities to like diabetes in our DNA. So is that like a conversation that needs to happen? Is like we actually now have to identify portions through iPhone?
So, okay. So you have very two distinctive points that you've made. Thank you. Okay, so there was some very foundational work done out in Waianae by Dr. Shintani, Dr. Claire Hughes, Dr. Oh my God, he was from Molokai, one of the first Native Hawaiian doctors, Dr. Tekunu Blaisdell, where they looked at feeding, but again, these were healthy individuals, not individuals that had any chronic diseases. They were fed as much as they wanted, poi, breadfruit, sweet potato, the leafy greens, as much as they wanted. And at the end of that study, they found that they had improvements in their weight, in their blood pressure, in their lipid values. And that was without, but again, they weren't eating any of the other things that made up their predominant diet, but they had no restriction on the amount. And so, we know so based on that foundational research, we know that for individuals that they don't have any predisposing conditions, these foods are health promoting. Now for individuals so that's in a situation of medical nutrition therapy where we have to be a little bit more thoughtful about the things that we put in to make sure that it doesn't, warrant an unnecessary spike in their blood sugars. So thinking about that portion control for somebody with diabetes would be important. And so that would be something to, make sure that you have a conversation, ask your provider to refer you to a dietitian to be able to help with making sure that, we're really have an understanding of what that means. And so, oftentimes too, what that can recommend is that you want to pair these food with like a protein to help with mitigating those spikes and things like that. So you can be really, the way in which you craft your eating behaviors. And again, activity. We cannot not emphasize the importance of activity in helping to manage that. But again, having those conversations, like you mentioned, with the health provider, referring to a dietitian would be really important to think about managing those symptoms. Good question.
Poi's pretty calorically dense, right?
So it is, but it also has a lot of fiber. And then the more sour it is, it also has a lot of good bacteria. And so, if you were to compare the caloric density for the equivalent, poi with the equivalent amount of rice, it's going to react differently in your body. And so the way that it is digested and the way it affects is going to be different. So, good question.
Just read the portion size. So like it's got all the vitamins and stuff.
Yeah.
It just got a lot of calories.
Yeah. And so I have some good friends who are paddlers, and they do like the long distance endurance paddling, and they actually prefer just to do poi. All you gotta do is snip the corner of the bag and you just squeeze it in your mouth. Because some of my more senior individuals, may be able to comment. I feel like poi is watery now in the bag. They're really stretching it. So you don't even need to add water anymore. You just squeeze it and it comes right out. But they like to use it as a source of energy for those long endurance. And it doesn't, because some of those, there's a lot of products out there on the market for, those endurance athletes. And it can really affect the digestive tract a little bit. Some of the certain components. And poi doesn't seem to have that same irritability on the digestive tract. So nobody wants to be out on a long distance run or in the ocean and having a tummy ache, right? That's the worst. And I guess maybe, with thinking about like our performance, really thinking about our healthy lifestyle, being really plant forward, that really is going to help our performance. Our hydration is going to help our performance. Fueling up after you have a real active session is going to be important. They say like a 30-minute window after to fuel your body. A lot of the literature or the science, I actually have one here, has found that one of the best things for our endurance, our athletes, is chocolate milk. Just basic chocolate milk. The composition of this food seems to be one of the best post-recovery fuel sources for your body. But again, I'm not saying go out and drink a quart of chocolate milk. This is 1 cup. This is 1 cup. Yeah. Any other questions?
There's a lot of zero sugar added, but you taste those things that has a ton of sugar. I mean, it tastes very sweet. So is it just fake sugar that they're putting in? Or, I don't know. Because a lot of people are saying, it's good for me because there's no sugar.
Okay, so there has been a lot of work done for sugar replacements. And so you have different ways in which those sugar replacements are created. They have sometimes sugar alcohols. They may extract component, there's like monk fruit sugar now. So there's lots of different things that they're trying to mimic that sweetness that you would get in sugar from a component that is, 1,000 times sweeter. So you don't need as much of that replacement to mimic that same sweetness effect. So that's how you get the displacement of energy. So, but the problem is that the research shows that diet sodas or those beverages that have those sugar replacements, our body doesn't seem to it's still not good for you. So that sweetness in the sugar, the sweetness in the beverage still mimics the effect as if whether or not it had sugar in it. So really, ultimately, it goes back to, again, as to, water being our foundational beverage. And then, we can have those things, here and there, but really, the research shows that it doesn't have the same effect on our body as water, which has no energy. So it's one of those interesting things that science, the research has been able to find out. So, yeah. And then the other thing, some people may have some distress in their stomachs because of like sugar alcohols. It doesn't digest well. And so some of those beverages may cause a little bit of a stomach upset from that. So it's all pretty interesting.
Can you expand on the 30-minute window after activities for recovery and like what's the best way to recover food-wise?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Where the 30-minute window came from, I'm not 100% Ma'atu. I just know that, again, because sports nutrition isn't my area of expertise. So I think I can find some resources specifically, and I can maybe share it with Josh, and then he can circulate back on where that 30-minute window is. I'm also very familiar with the chocolate milk as being the one that they've done a lot of research on being able to help with fueling your body for recovery. I'll go and look some things up and I'll send it to Josh, specific on that.
What's your thoughts on like supplementation and like vitamins and stuff like that?
Ah, okay. Well, I take a multivitamin. My kids take a multivitamin, I think being cognizant of what's in your supplements, you read your labels. So all of those foods, even supplements, they're all going to have a nutrition facts label. And so that nutrition facts label is going to tell you the things that are mandated. It'll tell you about energy and fat and things like that. But what's really important is you look at that ingredient list and you see what's the ingredients in there. And so when thinking about the supplements, I'm a big proponent of getting those things from food versus, from a supplement. Sometimes there can be things in the supplements too that, wouldn't be as ideal. There's some concerns about the food, the things that are put into our foods in regards to, for shelf stability, for presentation, that, there's some questionable things in there about the safety of it. So, I don't think there's anything wrong if you take a daily multivitamin and things like that. And for a lot of males, I find, protein. Oh, I need more protein. I need my protein shakes. I need my protein powders. When really what we see about what we gather from what people eat, we tend to eat a lot of protein as it is. So we really don't need to be adding more protein through supplements, because we really don't do good on the other things like the fruits and vegetables. So, yeah, does that answer your question a little bit about the supplements? Yeah.
Do you know if there was any fasting in Hawaii?
Fasting. Well, there would be times where there would be times of famine. Yes. Yes. So, yeah. That is a very good question. I wonder what our kupuna said about that. Because I know that, there was kapus, there was when you were to eat certain things. I know during pregnancy, they were very cognizant, especially in the third trimester. They didn't want moms to gain too much weight because they wanted to make sure that the delivery wouldn't be compromised. They had different plants that they would have them eat so that it would encourage the delivery to, be easier. So I know they were really ma'a about that, but I'm not really sure if, this whole concept of fasting or when we eat our foods and how that played a role. And that's something that's really emerging and being explored as to when our eating windows are, when they occur. But what we do know is that individuals who are our shift workers, they tend to have poor health outcomes. Because the way in which their circadian rhythms are and the way in which that it does seem to have an effect when your eating window is. But there still needs to be a lot more that we need to learn about that before we can have like any substantive evidence on that. At the Cancer Center, we right now are doing a clinical trial where we're comparing daily energy restriction versus intermittent, so just 2 days a week of restriction versus daily to see if it changes. We're focusing mostly on that fat that accumulates in our midsection, because we know that the fat that accumulates in our midsection, because that's where all of our organs are, has a really detrimental effect on our health outcome in comparison to the fat that may accumulate around our hips. It has a different effect on our body. So we're trying to see if intermittent versus daily, if it changes that. So hopefully in a couple years, we'll have some more detail on that coming out of the Cancer Center specific to that. So, yeah. Actually, we are looking for more men for that study if anybody's interested. We have a lot of wahine, but not enough men.
The average life expectancy at 1800 was 30. 1900, 47. So if all these things were good back then, why wasn't the life?
That's a good question. So 30s at what time? In 1800. So, the one thing that affected that time and the life expectancy too is also the infectious diseases that were introduced. Even the common cold was extremely detrimental because we didn't have the immune systems to be able to fight those. So I think that would be coming into play with those life expectancy differences. As to what they would document, I mean, it is a noted point. I wonder what it says for if we were to look back at some of our Native Hawaiian scholars from before on that. That's a good question.
Is there
Yeah.
any known like pre-contact life expectancy?
I mean, we have what we have in like our Kumulipo and all of our different mo'olelos. I mean, in some of our Native Hawaiian scholars like Malo and stuff like that. But that's a good question. I'll make a note of that. I'm going to go and see what I can find, and I'll share it with Josh. Yeah.
Would you think the general population of about 300,000 was put in by 1800, it was down to 200,000. Chapin in 1831, it was down to 130. Reciprocity Treaty was less than 40,000.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, in one century, you went from 12
Yes.
to 1.
Yeah, no, he is exactly right. And here in Hawaii, I mean, that's across the Pacific, the level of decline. I think our Chamorro cousins from when the Spanish colonized them in the 1500s, if I remember correctly, they went down to 4,000. So, mm-hmm. Right.
19, 20, 14.
Yeah. No, but my understanding is the infectious diseases had a pivotal role in those decline.
How do they do health studies? Because one of the things I was reading is they have challenges with all of them. Because it's really long term. You have people that are eating one thing, but then you have no idea what they're doing. You're not like trapping them in a hospital.
Ah, yeah.
What if they are running? What if they don't run? Like, How do they do it, especially longer term?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. And that is one of the things that, and when you think about all the different fields, we always get complaints that, diet, there's so many things that are like muddying the waters because of the things like you say that makes it really difficult to really tease out like what's really occurring. And so something that we're doing right now, so a lot of what we know has really been from following people over a long period of time. And so there's been a lot of cohorts that have been done where we followed people over time. And then we've periodically asked them about their diet, what they've eaten, and then seen what type of, health outcomes have occurred. And so that's been pretty foundational, but admittedly, there's a lot of noise in that, right? There's a lot of things that may be influencing it because we're not putting people in a controlled environment because that's not practical. So at the Cancer Center, we have what's referred to as the multi-ethnic cohort, where they've been following individuals since the 90s here in Hawaii and in Los Angeles County. And so, many of the individuals in the cohort have since passed away because in the 90s, some of them were in their 70s already. But we asked them questionnaires about their diet. We asked them questions about other health outcomes. We brought some of the individuals in and, did blood work. We've done some stool samples and things like that so that we can maybe look at specific markers in their blood, in their stools to see if we see things that come up that may be related to the way that their diet was. So that's one example. Another example is right now we're a part of the Nutrition for Precision Health study. And so what they've done in that study is they have one module where they just follow people for a couple weeks, just in their normal living conditions. And we have them collect information on their diet every day for those couple of weeks. And they do blood, they do spit, they do stool. So they do lots of they're doing continuous glucose monitoring. And then, a couple months later, we bring them back in. And then we keep them in their free living environment, but then we provide them all their food. And we do all those same measures. And then for some of those individuals, we actually ask them to come and stay in a place for a couple weeks. And we feed them all their food. And then so that's actually going on right now. So we'll see. The only bummer is that, we're the center that's coordinating all the diet collection, but we actually don't have a site here for the people. So all of that is being done on the continent. And that's the problem. So that's my pilikia, is that we're never really represented. And if we're not represented in those larger studies, our foods aren't represented. So when I was telling you about your seaweed question, where did he go? My seaweed guy. Oh, he went to the bath. That's the pilikia, because we're not in those big studies, so we're not adding to what they know about food. So our foods aren't being analyzed. So when you go to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and you ask them, okay, can you tell me what's in ulu? They're only going to tell you one generic ulu. You're not going to get the specificity. The same thing with the banana. And so that's my pilikia. So hopefully we'll be able to advance the field because we know that there's certain varieties that just have a different composition than others. So that's the cool thing. Yeah.
So historical trauma and stress also affects your body too.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, when they do all those studies, right? We think it's ideal because you're keeping them in the thing, but it's all the other
things, right? We have the historical trauma. We have that certain communities don't have access, right? We have communities where there's not even grocery stores. We have communities where they don't have sidewalks. We have communities where, a plethora of things, right? Education, income, whether or not they have access to certain programs, all of that is influencing our health. And so really, if we can implement different components that can help to at least combat some of that in the choices that we make, but admittedly, it can be really hard to make these choices depending on where you live. And if you don't have the ability and the access to be able to grow foods, that can make it really hard. And so, also recognizing that people are doing the best that they can, right? And, really we're constrained by the environments that we lived in, the history and the social, economic, and, like the things that we're told, oh, Hawaiians only can be this, or you're all like this, you're all, all fill in the blank, right? But we know that's not how it is, right? We know we can rise to the occasion. So, good point.